shot at the night. Give me a shot at the night. Give me a shot at the night. I feel like I'm losing the fight. Give me a shot at the night. Some kind of mysterious. Give me a shot at the night. Oh, frightened to carry on. But imagine those deep blue skies waiting. No matter what time it takes, we'll run away to the lakes, and summer will find us there waiting. We can see through the shadows with light to be where we belong. We can be safe in our own little place where the skyline kiss the shore. We will go on, we will go on and on. We feel alive in the waters with divers. The night fire warms our boat. We will go on, we will go on and on. My love, there's nothing else we can do. And as the light fades in you, the stars will come out and guide us there. We can see through the shadows with light to be where we belong. We can be safe in our own little place where the skyline kiss the shore. We will go on, we will go on and on. We feel alive in the waters with divers. The night fire warms our boat. We will go on, we will go on and on. Stay close, hold on to me. By the lakes. We can be safe in our own little place where the skyline kiss the shore. We will go on, we will go on and on. We feel alive in the waters with divers. The night fire warms our boat. We will go on, we will go on and on. We will go on and on. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, a little unsteady. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, a little unsteady. Mama, come here, approach, appear. Daddy, I'm alone, 'cause this house don't feel like 'cause I'm a little unsteady, little unsteady. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, little unsteady. Mother, I know that you're tired of being alone. Dad, I know you're trying to fight when you feel like flying. But if you love me, don't let go. Whoa. If you love me, don't let go. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, little unsteady. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, little unsteady. Hold on to me, 'cause I'm a little unsteady, little unsteady.
Bend your chest open so I can read your heart. I need to get inside or I'll start a war. Wanna look at the pieces that make you who you are. Outside the bright, I'm gonna out. I'm gonna love you inside out. Let me see the dark sides as well as the bright.
disappeared, the animals inside came out to play. Went face to face with all our fears, learned our lessons through the tears, made memories we knew would never fade. One day my father, he told me, son, don't let it slip away. He took me in his arms, I heard him say, when you get older, your wild heart will live for younger days. Think of me if ever you're afraid. He said one day you'll leave this world behind, so live a life you will remember. My father told me when I was just a child, these are the nights that never die. My father told me. Can't put out, carve your name into those shining stars. He said go venture far beyond the shores, don't forsake this life of yours. I'll guide you home no matter where you are. One day my father, he told me, son, don't let it slip away. When I was just a kid I heard him say, when you get older your wild heart will live for younger days. Think of me if ever you're afraid. He said one day you'll leave this world behind, so live a life you will remember. My father told me when I was just a child, these are the nights that never die. My father told me. These are the nights that never die. My father told me.
I miss the taste of the sweet life. I miss the conversation. I'm searching for a song tonight. I'm changing all of the stations. I like to think that we had it all. We drew a map to a better place, but on that road I took a fall. Oh baby, why did you run away? I was there
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tories Have Got Talent. You can decide which of you are Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, etc. My name's Ian Dale. I'm going to be your compere for the afternoon. Let me just tell you one or two things that are going to happen this afternoon. This is, of course, the first of the 16 different leadership hustings that are taking place in all regions and countries of the United Kingdom. Welcome to everyone watching the live stream on the Conservatives' Facebook page and Twitter feed. And in a few moments' time, I think viewers from Sky News and the BBC will be joining us as well. Now, the Conservative Party, as you know, isn't just choosing a party leader today or in the next few weeks. You're choosing a Prime Minister for this country. Now, these hustings are designed to put the two candidates through their paces. That's in part down to you. It's also in part down to me. Let me tell you the format of what's going to happen this afternoon. We've got a couple of short warm-up acts for you. I hope they don't mind me describing them as that. Then we will show you a short video from Boris Johnson's campaign team before we introduce Boris. He will then talk to you for a maximum of 7 minutes, yes, all of 7 minutes. Then I will ask him 15 minutes worth of questions, then it's over to you. And I should explain that you've all been asked to submit questions in advance. We've had literally hundreds. I've selected them myself. No one from Conservative campaign headquarters has been involved in the questions that I've selected. I've got completely free rein on those questions, and I've got completely free rein to ask any questions in the interview that I like, because we all know there are always conspiracy theorists in these things that think that there must be some malign influence somewhere. Well, let me tell you from the start, if it goes wrong, it's down to me, nobody else. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. It's Andy Street, Mayor of the West Midlands.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm the warm-up act, and of course, my job is to welcome everybody to the West Midlands. So, Mr. Chairman, fellow members, and of course, our future leaders, welcome to the West Midlands, the heart of the country, and today, the centre of this critical national decision. We've got members from across the region here with us today, from Shrewsbury to Solihull, from Warwick to Wolverhampton, and you are indeed all welcome. Now, here in the West Midlands, I hope you can see the difference that Conservative leadership is making. We're busy renewing our region, laying the foundations, and you can see the cranes in the skyline. And today, as one of the most vibrant and diverse communities anywhere in the world, we are making huge progress. This is the fastest growing region over the last 7 years. We're the export capital of the UK. And of course, young people are voting with their feet. More young Londoners coming here than anywhere else. And at the same time, we've reduced our carbon emissions by 20% over just 6 years. And most importantly, we're working very hard to ensure that success is shared by everyone. Last year, over 20% more homes built here. We're investing billions in transport, and for the first time ever, now over half of our population are educated and have skills to level 3. So, you're here in a region that genuinely is seeing a renaissance. But the most important thing for today's debate is that that is happening under Conservative leadership. A Conservative mayor in partnership with a Conservative government. And the next chapter of this story will be written by one of the two gentlemen you'll be hearing from just a little later on. But let's not forget that that progress could all be thrown away by a hard left Labour government. So our new leader, quite simply, has got to secure the progress we're seeing. They have got to stop Jeremy Corbyn dead in his tracks. And this afternoon, we'll debate some of the great challenges facing Britain and think about our place in the world in the 21st century. And above all else, we will hear how our new leader will take that battle to Labour and will deliver for places like the West Midlands, modern, inclusive, and of course, progressive places in Britain. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've all got a great responsibility to choose our next Prime Minister. Good luck to both of the contenders this afternoon, and good luck to all of you in exercising your judgment wisely. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you very much. I should have said that there is going to be no interval act either, I have to tell you. We're going straight from Boris Johnson to Jeremy Hunt. There will obviously be a video from Jeremy Hunt's campaign team as well before we move on to his opening statement, 15 minutes of interview, and also then half an hour or so of questions. Let me, before we get to our first contender though, let me introduce you to Pam Hall, Vice President of the Conservative Party National Convention. Pam.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm not just part of the warm-up today, I'm a stand-in warm-up because Andrew Sharp, unfortunately, has spent a couple of hours on the M25 this morning, so he's not here yet, but he will be with us later. But I'm actually going to read you his speech. So it's an honour and a privilege to welcome you to this, the first of 16 hustings for the leadership candidates around the country. It's great to see so many people here. And you won't be surprised to hear there is huge interest in attending the hustings and necessitated more than one change of venue around the country. It is gratifying to see all our members engaging on such a massive scale, but I'm not surprised. By now, we are all used to the typical media narrative that we Tories are propped up in bath chairs with hearing trumpets, wearing Grandad's tweed suits. But nothing could be further from the truth. That doesn't mean they won't try and find unflattering pictures to prove their point, so breathe in, ladies and gentlemen. The party that I and my National Convention colleagues know, the one that we see every week as we travel around the country, is made up of engaged and engaging men and women, of every colour, faith, age and sexual preference, united by their belief in our country, our institutions and an unshakable tradition of public service. I've never met anyone in our party who cares where you come from. We only care where you're going. We must not forget that there is far more that unites us than divides us. As Lord Hailsham said, Conservatism is not so much a philosophy as an attitude, a constant force performing a timeless function in the development of a free society. We are here today to take a solemn duty as part of that commitment to a free society. We are not just electing a new party leader, but our Prime Minister. The country which we love would expect us to ensure that this process is rigorous. We need a Prime Minister who will deliver Brexit and beat our political opponents. Someone who, as those of us who knock on doors know, week in and week out, are less committed to that free society than we are. Last Saturday, the National Convention held the first hustings for the 6 candidates that were still in the race. I'm sure you will have heard feedback from that event by now, but if you haven't, it was an excellent day. Good-humoured, positive, respectful and bursting with talent and good ideas. All those who attended were impressed by the quality on display, and I know that those same qualities will dominate these hustings. Supported by the National Convention offices, Andrew made the case at the party board that the leadership campaign had to reach every part of the United Kingdom. All members should have access to at least one hustings. And there was no disagreement. So at this point, we'd like to thank the party chairman, the Right Honourable Brandon Lewis MP, for his support with this. Andrew would also like to thank him more generally for his support for the Voluntary Party. He's been very consistent and we have more resources at our disposal than for many years, in a large part because of his efforts. I'd also like to thank your regional team, led by Jim Cooper, OBE. As you will know, Jim is a tireless advocate for the West Midlands and he is deservedly held in very high regard. Andrew's now given me a quote, which is actually from Winston Churchill, so I'm delighted to him for that. And it's what he said to his association when addressing them for the very last time in 1959. It resonates today, and I hope it will inform our final 2 candidates. By our courage, our endurance and our brains, we have made our way in the world to the lasting benefit of mankind. Let us not lose heart. Our future is one of high hope. That's spot on. And we look forward to the candidates outlining their vision for our future.
Thank you very much, Pam. Well, before we get to our main event, let's hear from the chairman of the Conservative Party, Brandon Lewis.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And it's a privilege to be back here in the West Midlands, somewhere that is so important both to our country and to our party, not just with the mayoral elections next year, with so many key seats for us. It seems very fitting that we start our hustings for the party here in Birmingham in the West Midlands. I also want to thank the 1922 committee, our colleagues in Parliament who have run such a fantastically efficient and professional process over the last few weeks that has led us to having two great candidates for us all to consider in the weeks ahead. And not just as your chairman, but as a long-standing member of the party, I absolutely appreciate the importance for all of us as members to have the chance over the next few weeks to hear from our candidates and to cast our votes for the next leader of our party in the solemn, absolute, understood knowledge that we are selecting the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And that's why it is so important and why I'm so pleased that we are able to hold these hustings over the next few weeks in every region and every nation of the United Kingdom, so that every member will have their opportunity to come and hear from our candidates firsthand. And today we are live streaming this event so that everybody can see what our candidates have to say about the future of our party and of our country. And next week we'll be holding our first ever digital hustings as well, that everybody across the country will be able to view and take part in. Because we are determined to make sure that everybody knows what we know, which is that we are a party that understands the duty that lays before us. And I know all of you will take the opportunity, both today and over the next few weeks, to make that decision well informed by what you hear. And I hope that this afternoon and over the next few weeks, you enjoy the hustings as we hear from both of our candidates who will be outlining to all of us the vision that they have got for taking our country forward and for taking our party forward. And that's a chance for us as a whole party to remind the country and show people across the United Kingdom why it is the Conservative Party that has the ideas, the vision and the enthusiasm and the drive to deliver opportunity for everybody across our country. Enjoy this afternoon and thank you for coming.
Lots were drawn and Boris Johnson will be going first, but before we hear from Boris Johnson, his campaign team have done a little video for us.
Nice to see you. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal on October the 31st.
Good man.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Would that make you come back and vote Conservative again?
Yes.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
But we've got to have the courage to tell the people of this country that we can do it if we really want to. And that's the only way, actually.
And you're the only person that can do that.
A lot of teachers are telling me that they feel that the funding per pupil isn't high enough. We need more police out there, but sometimes I think we need. And stop and search?
Yes.
Totally with you.
I'm scared because my daughter used to live in London as well.
Yeah.
She was at university.
Safe big city it was when I used to run it. I can tell you we got crime down by 20%. We got the murder rate down.
Like Mr. Carl off, but it's not good.
But I also think we need to be supporting the wealth creators and the business sector, because otherwise you're not going to have the dosh to invest. Right. Cut some taxes and you'll get more money in. Would you normally think of yourself as a Conservative voter, would you say?
No.
No? Ever? Can I ask you a terrible question? Would you consider voting for me?
Yes.
If there is one lesson from that referendum of 2016, it is that too many people feel left behind, that they're not able to take part fully in the opportunities and success of our country. That's why now is the time to unite our society and unite our country, to build the infrastructure, to invest in education, to improve our environment and to support our fantastic NHS, to lift everyone in our country, and of course also to make sure that we support our wealth creators and the businesses that make that investment possible. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and what we can do. And that's why I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, my friends. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my friends. I cannot hide it from you that we meet in dark days for our party, and I have never known us to be down at 17 points in the polls. I've never known a national election when our wonderful Conservative Party should get 9%. And we all know roughly what has gone wrong. It's two other parties, Brexit Party and the Lib Dems, sprouting like puffballs and feeding saprophytically on the decay of the two main parties because of our failure to get on and deliver the mandate of the people. And yet I say to you this afternoon in Birmingham that the hour is darkest before dawn. And I'm here to tell you in all confidence that we can turn this thing round and we can go on to defeat Jeremy Corbyn. And the first thing we need to do, you know what it is? We need to get Brexit done. And as someone who campaigned for Brexit, who believes in Brexit, someone who has meditated deeply on the opportunities that Brexit could bring our country, I am the right man to unleash now on that project. And in fact, there is a pretty broad consensus, as you saw in the recent, slightly cacophonous BBC debate, about how to do it. You disaggregate the elements of the otherwise defunct withdrawal agreement. You take the protections for the 3.2 million European Union nationals in our country, you put them into law, you reserve the payment of the 39 billion. Creative ambiguity needed there, I think, until the solution. And then, of course, you solve the problems of free movement of goods across the Irish, Northern Irish and other borders to where they logically belong. And that is in the context of the free trade agreement that we will negotiate in the implementation period after we have come out on October the 31st. And, of course, there will be those who say, oh, it'll be all very difficult, and Brussels will say no, and rien ne va plus. And all I can say is I am utterly convinced that with the right energy and the right commitment, common sense will prevail. But just in case it does not, we must prepare to come out anyway. And we must be able to come out on WTO terms so that for the first time in these negotiations, we carry conviction. And it's precisely because we will be preparing between now and October the 31st for a no-deal Brexit that we will get the deal we need. And if we can get this done and get it over the line, then we will pitchfork this incubus off our backs, we will end the sense of drift and indecision, and we will be able to get on with a fantastic modern Conservative agenda. And if I could sum up in one sentence my ambition for this country, it is to unite our country, unite our society, and to bring the whole of the UK together in the way that we were able to do in London. Because when I became elected 11 years ago, they talked of a tale of two cities in London. We had 4 of the 6 poorest boroughs in the whole of the UK. Well, I can tell you after 2 terms, 8 years, at the end of my time as mayor, we had none of the poorest 20 boroughs anywhere in the UK, in London. Society came together, and how did we do it? We did it by fantastic investments in infrastructure to help people on modest incomes get to their place of work. We got crime down to about 20%, we got the murder rate down by 50%, and of course we championed the resurgence of education in London. And now is the time to apply that formula. Education, investment in infrastructure, use of technology to bring our whole country together. Because too many people, look at that Brexit vote, too many people feel left behind by the incredible success of this country. And our ambition must be now to bring Britain, bring the whole of the UK together, uniting all four nations, the awesome, foursome, and uniting society. And you do it first with increased education funding, and I want to level up across the country. I want to see fantastic infrastructure, and I would like to be the Prime Minister who helps Andy Street to do here in the West Midlands with his fantastic plans for metro rail connectivity, what we were able to do with Crossrail and the tube upgrades in London. We should be pushing forward broadband across the whole country, and that is the way, far quicker than the current programme, and that is the way to create the platform for business to grow and invest. And we know that this incredible UK economy soars as it does, like an eagle, because it has two wings: a dynamic free market enterprise culture and fantastic public services, each giant wing propelling the other. And Jeremy Corbyn just simply does not understand that. It's not just that he's a Hamas-supporting, anti-Semitism condoning apologist for Moscow. You continue with all the compound adjectives that you're familiar with. He would whack up taxes: corporation tax, financial transaction tax, inheritance tax, income tax up to 50%, all to pay for his deranged £300 billion programme of renationalisation. And he and John McDonnell would pluck by taxation so many feathers from the wealth-creating wing that the whole UK economy would go into a death spiral. So let's keep Corbyn out. Let's keep McDonnell's plucking fingers away from this country. And let's take Britain forward. Let's take Britain forward and all the incredible range of businesses and industries in which we lead the world. We are here in the birthplace not just of the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution. The incredible thing is that Birmingham and the West Midlands are today still the home of revolutions in new technology that will not only cut CO2, the battery technology that's being pioneered in this area, not only cut CO2, but create tens of thousands of jobs this year and in the future. What we need to discover now, my friends, is a new confidence in our country. We need to revitalise our party. We need to unite and defeat Jeremy Corbyn, and I believe we can do it. And in case I have failed to make this point earlier on in these remarks, and seeing as I have 32 seconds left, let me remind you that the last time I had to face an emanation of the London Labour left, considerably more fertile and ingenious than Jeremy Corbyn, I was able to defeat him when we Conservatives were 17 points behind Labour in London. We did it then, we can do it again. We can and we must. And I believe that if I'm allowed to succeed in this contest, with your help, we will. And I hope I can count on your support. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do I go over? Thank you.
I want to spend as much time as possible talking about your plans for the future, but you know as well as I do that there is one subject on everybody's lips today, and they want to know why the police were called to your house in the early hours of Friday morning.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you very much for your kind remarks and your generous introduction, and thank you everybody for coming along to these first and most important hustings that we're going to be having. I don't know, it's not the most important, be careful what I say. They'll all be important, but these are the first. Ian, listen, I think what people have come here today, seductive interviewer, there you are. I think people have, I don't think they want to hear about that kind of thing, unless I'm wrong. I think, forgive me, I think what they want to hear is what my plans are for the country and for our party.
We will come on to that.
And I know you're going to have to come back, and I salute your indefatigability as a journalist. But I'm under the sad obligation of wanting to get my message across to our party.
Well, you've just taken up a minute with that answer, which has told us absolutely nothing. If the police If the police are called to your home, it makes it everyone's business. You are running for the office of not just leader of the Conservative Party, but Prime Minister. So therefore, a lot of people who admire your politics do call into question your character, and I think it is incumbent on you to answer that question.
That's, okay, well, look, that's a fair point. And people are entitled to ask about me and my determination, my character, and what I want to do for the country. And let me just tell you that when I make a promise in politics about what I'm going to do, I keep that promise and I deliver. And sometimes I must confess that when I was mayor in London, I even delivered some of the promises that people thought were most eccentric and most unwise. I mean, people said that we shouldn't have an open platform on the back of the new Route Master bus. I think they said that Brussels was against it and that it was against health and safety. But we delivered it, and we delivered cuts in
With
crime,
respect,
as I've said.
you're completely avoiding my question.
Well, I've told you I was going to tell the good folk who have come here about. You asked about my character. Actually, I'm not avoiding your question. You asked a very direct question about my character, and what I'm telling you.
Well, let me put it another way.
Let me put it another way.
Does a person's private life have any
promises,
bearing on their ability to do the job as Prime Minister?
Promises, and when you look at my determination to deliver for people who vote for me, when I say I will do X, I generally speaking deliver X plus 10. So we said we were going to cut crime. We actually cut crime, as I said, by almost 20%. We cut the murder rate in London by 50%. We massively increased investment in transport. And it was, broadly speaking, a golden age. And I think most people, if I can say, most people would really rather judge my ambitions and my character and my programme by what I deliver.
No, what they want to know is... Just answer that. It is a very simple question. I think any politician, I shall ask Jeremy Hunt the same question as well. Does a person's private life...
Don't boo! No. Don't boo the great man.
When he answers this question, I will move on.
No.
Does a person's private life have any bearing on their ability to discharge the office of Prime Minister?
Well, I've tried to give my answer pretty exhaustively. I think what people want to know is whether I have the determination and the courage to deliver on the commitments that I'm making, and it will need a lot of grit right now. And I think people are entitled to think about this, and this is a relevant consideration, actually, Ian. When I was mayor, we went through some very tough times, and we had the deepest recession for 50 years. We had riots, which you may remember. We had strikes. We had all sorts of really difficult things to deal with. The Olympics themselves, by the way, were no picnic to begin with. I mean, the opening, the 3 weeks before the Olympics were a heavily disguised disaster, actually. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And it was my job to keep people together, to bring our city together, and to get the job done. And that, I think, is what the people of this country are looking for now. They're looking for somebody with the determination and the courage and the application to get Brexit over the line, to relaunch our party, and then to take the fight to the socialists. That's what people want.
So just to be clear, you're not going to make any comment at all on what happened last night?
I think that's pretty obvious from the foregoing, Ian. But I've sat where you've sat. I understand the responsibilities.
Well, I wouldn't have spent the first 5 minutes on it had you answered the first question.
Well, I did answer it.
Anyway,
let's move on. If you want to give me another opportunity to say what I want to do, I'm happy to do it.
It's day one. You've been appointed Prime Minister. You've been to see the Queen. You've done the Where There Is Discord, Maybe Bring Harmony bit on the steps of Downing Street. What's the first thing that you as Prime Minister do when you sit down at your desk? What's the one thing that's driven you that you want to get accomplished on that first day?
Well, I've spoken of three things just today. We need to do more for education funding in our country, and I think that the formula currently doesn't work. And speaking as somebody who is very lucky in his life, I've been very lucky, but I want to see kids around the country have an opportunity, have the basic tool of self-improvement that every child in this country deserves. And at the moment, the funding formula does not work for schools across the UK in the way that it should. We need to level up, and we need to do it fast. So that's number one. Number two, I want to see, as I said earlier on, I want to see a rollout of full fibre across the country. It's insane that there are whole towns in the UK, rural areas, that are not getting access to the internet in the way that they have in Spain. The internet is no longer a luxury. It's the basic utensil of economic growth and of communication. And we've got now whole areas of the country where people are looking at the spinning pizza wheel of doom, when in Spain they have 85% coverage of full fibre. We should be, if they can do it in Spain, and we got 7% in the UK. If they can do it in Spain, we should do it here. And then, of course, I mean, this is going to be a very busy day, but I can, as you will know,
I'm not going to be able to interrupt.
As you will know, we have an immediate job of work to do to get ready for coming out of the EU on October the...
I want to come on to that.
31st. And to do that,
okay,
obviously, we'll need to.
And on that first day, we'll come on to Brexit in just a second, but on that first day, you'll also be appointing your cabinet. I don't expect you to appoint your cabinet here, you'll be pleased to know.
No.
But will you offer Michael Gove a cabinet job?
Well, Ian, you've just said that you don't expect me to appoint my cabinet here, and you just, you know.
No, just. I don't expect you to say
You're a brilliant
job.
question, and you're a very tough interrogator, but you could at least be consistent in your approach.
I don't expect you to tell me which job, but do you want him in your team?
I see there are plenty of candidates here in this room, and it would be invidious of me to speculate about that. But what I will say, actually, is that there is at the moment probably a greater wealth of talent in the Parliamentary Conservative Party than I think I've ever seen in my lifetime.
That's enough sucking up to the front row.
I'm just telling you.
Right, Brexit. October the 31st, obviously a very important date. Now, your critics accuse you of slightly pivoting on your commitment at your leadership launch to leave by that date, come what may. Can you reassure this audience that that will happen, come what may?
Yeah, I mean, all I said was the most bizarre thing. All I said in the BBC debate, which was basically, the whole thing was completely inaudible, but what I said was that leaving on October the 31st was, my words were eminently feasible. Which was taken to mean that I wasn't 100% determined to do it. Eminently feasible means it's not only that we are going to do it, but it's possible to do it because it's eminently feasible.
But will you do it?
Of course we can do it.
No, of
yes.
course, I know we can do it.
That's the spirit.
But will we do
Hold
it?
that thought.
But
that's the spirit.
I know.
That's the kind of can-do attitude that will get you a place in the cabinet unless you're careful.
Oh, really?
That's what we want to hear.
Flattery will get you everywhere. No, but seriously, if you say it's eminently feasible, that means it's possible. What this audience wants to hear is that you are definitely committed to doing it. You know it will be done, not just can be done. Yeah. And you've got a plan for that.
Let me. I think it's worth spending a bit of time on this because this is obviously the number one task, and clearly. There is a change in politics since March the 29th when we failed to come out and then failed to come out again on April the 8th. And as I was saying in my introduction, what we have now is both parties really staring down the barrel because, as I said, we're losing votes to parties that are quite properly feasting on our failure to get this done, both the Liberal Democrats and, of course, the new Brexit party. And you would expect them. You would expect them to move into this territory because we failed to get it done. And so I think all of us in the Conservative Party and in the Labour Party, who are not doing that much better than us, I mean, you know, superhuman incompetence of the Labour Party, they actually managed to go backwards in the recent council elections. We didn't do very well, I have to say. But they went backwards too. They are facing, like us, an existential crisis unless we get this done, unless we come together, take our responsibilities soberly and with maturity as elected representatives and get out with a sensible deal. And as I was saying, there are various elements that we have to get right. Yes, I think we should disaggregate the provisions on citizenship, and there are some other things that we could do unilaterally and in a supererogatory way, and the things we could pass through our House of Commons, and we should. sensible things on Gibraltar or whatever, then of course there is the question of the money, and that is difficult. And people will expect us to pay the 39 billion.
Do you accept we have to pay some of it?
I think it's important that as the UK's negotiator, we should retain some creative ambiguity about the money until such time as we get a resolution.
But what does that say about Britain as a country? If we commit to something, and we are legally obliged to pay at least part of it, what does it say if you leave that in constructive ambiguity?
I think what it says is that this is a country that is determined to conduct itself in accordance with the tradition of EU negotiations, because I have never known an EU negotiation that did not climax with the financial settlement. One of the most eccentric features of our negotiating style over the last 3 years is that we decided to anticipate that.
But you were in the cabinet that agreed
that denouement, and to put the money across the line first. And actually, you raise a very important point, and one of the earliest things against which I protested in cabinet was this curious decision to put the money in first.
But if you couldn't persuade Theresa May, how are you going to persuade the EU?
I was, as you know, in our system, the Prime Minister is primus inter pares. And it was difficult to persuade not only her, but the rest of the cabinet, of my point of view. And I hope very much that with the kind of gung-ho spirit that you have shown today,
I think I'm going to be Brexit secretary
in the cabinet, with the kind of determination that I know that colleagues have, we can get this thing done. But the most important point, as you know, is neither the provisions on citizenship or the ongoing court cases or any of that stuff. The most important issue is the 175 pages of what's called the Northern Ireland backstop. And clearly there is an issue that has to be handled with great tact, with great sensitivity, but it can be done. And everybody understands that there are solutions to the problems of free movement of goods across the Northern Irish border, and this is agreed amongst all.
Can I just ask about an aspect
all
of
candidates,
this?
or both candidates,
Just on the no deal scenario.
Yes.
You've said that we would leave under the GATT24 rules. Now, Mark Carney yesterday, you will have seen, completely rubbished that. I gather Liam Fox has as well, and today Michel Barnier's spokesman has said that that could not happen. You wouldn't be able to avoid immediate tariffs in the event of a no deal. What do you know that they don't?
Well, of course, it is logically true that in order to make progress under GATT 24, paragraph 5b, it is vital that both sides agree. And I think what Mark and the various others that you mentioned would acknowledge is that it is not in the interests of our friends and partners, I believe, unilaterally to impose tariffs if we
No, but the rules say that's what would have to happen.
Actually, the rules say that both sides can decide not to impose tariffs, and that is what we could do.
What incentive would there be for the EU not to do that?
Well, I think just this, that if the EU decided unilaterally to impose tariffs on goods for the United Kingdom, it would probably be the first time since the Napoleonic continental system that there had been such a pointless interruption of trade between us, and I don't think that they would want to go down that route. The commonsensical solution, as everybody I think knows, and I think all the candidates in the BBC debate were in the same place or roughly the same place, the commonsensical solution is to take the questions of the resolution of the backstop issue, take them, the maximum facilitations that we will need, and put them where they logically belong in the context of the free trade agreement that we will negotiate after we come out on October the 31st. That is the way to do it.
1 minute left. I'm going to ask the same question to Jeremy Hunt as well. What's the biggest personal crisis you've ever faced, and what lessons did you draw from it?
I think we had some. I think the London riots probably weren't the easiest time, because this was a moment.
Crisis.
This was a moment
Yeah, I was on holiday. It was.
I remember.
Yeah, I mean, it was a total
Rockies,
disaster. I was literally 400 miles from the nearest airport, and it was a catastrophe. And I arrived at Calgary. I had to hire two new cars. And I drove 400 miles. And as I got to the airport, I could there was BBC TV news footage running of these riots, and I felt an absolutely overwhelming sense of obligation and responsibility and horror. And of course, when I got there, I immediately did absolutely everything I could to get out on the streets and to help to bring the city together and to turn it round. And actually, a year later, in spite of the riots, Londoners came together and put on the most spectacular Olympic Games, Paralympic Games that had ever been staged.
So the lesson is don't go on holiday.
So the lesson is don't give up, because this country can achieve amazing things.
Right, time for questions. Right, if we could have the lights up. Jonathan Gullis has a question. Jonathan, where are you? Over here.
Jonathan Gullis, proud parliamentary candidate for Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk. Mr Johnson, would you increase police levels back to pre-2010 levels?
Yes, I think that the police funding needs, in addition to education, we need to do more to get police out on the streets. And when I've seen the figures here in this part of the country, we've got far too many kids dying still. Partly as a result of this appalling gang crime and knife crime, which is being driven, by drugs and the county lines stuff that's going on. You need police out there, and you need, I'm afraid, stop and search. If you're going to do things to reduce gang crime and knife crime, you have to back the police. And I know that stop and search is controversial, but in the 18 months after I became Mayor of London, we took something like 11,000 knives off the streets of London, and lo and behold, serious youth violence went down 32%, the murder rate went down 50%, and the deaths of young kids also fell very sharply. So I believe, and we did it, to get to your point, by keeping police numbers at or around 32,000. I really believe strongly in backing the police politically and legally, but also in getting them out there and helping them to do their job that they signed up to do.
Do you think over the last 9 years the police haven't felt backed up? When Theresa May was Home Secretary, the police numbers have been cut by 20,000. If you talk to many police officers, as I do on my radio show all the time, they are demoralised. What can you do, apart from just increasing the numbers, what can you do to help morale in the police force?
Well, if I may say, there's one thing that you need to do as a leader of a country or as the representative of great public services. And that is to recognise that you're not just the chief consumer, you're actually there to provide encouragement and support. You're also, in a sense, the chief producer. And we did that in London. I was the Commissioner for Policing and Crime, effectively, and just as I was Chairman of Transport for London. And if you want to drive change, and you want to make reforms, and you want to make savings, which you obviously have to do, and we all as Conservatives understand that you have to do that, you have to make sure that you're backing up the people who are delivering fantastic frontline services. And you're having, I would never do anything to step away from the police or to show that they had anything less than my 100% support.
You go as far?
And so to go, I think one mistake we made was to take the foot off the gas when it came to stop and search. And the police didn't feel that they had top cover from the politicians. And I would want to give that again.
But would you echo the promise that Sajid Javid made during the campaign to restore the police numbers back to 2010, as Jonathan was suggesting? There are 148,000 police officers in 2010. It's something like 120 to 125,000 now. Would you make the same commitment that he did?
I think Saj he's a terrific Home Secretary, and I think that I think that was the right thing to say. Yeah, I think we want to, obviously there are savings.
Are you saying it?
He's the Home Secretary. That's his policy. I mean, he's no longer contending in this thing, but he's totally right. He's totally right, and I would want to drive that forward. Unless you have public policing, people don't necessarily have the sense of reassurance that they deserve.
Right, Jonathan, thank you. Let's go to Alec Bradley. Where's Alec? Over here.
In June last year, during a Foreign Office reception, you were asked about corporate concerns regarding a hard Brexit. You replied, "Fuck business." Is your attitude towards British jobs still as cavalier and as careless as it obviously was then?
Well, I must say that, I bitterly resent the way one stray remark to the Belgian ambassador, who was making the case that the UK would not be able to leave the European Union. I don't think that should be allowed to cloud what is, I think, a pretty extraordinary record as a politician for sticking up for business at every conceivable opportunity. And I can't think of any other politician, even Conservative politician, who, from the crash of 2008 onwards, actually stuck up for the bankers. Can you think of anybody who stuck up for the bankers as much as I did? I defended them day in, day out against those who frankly wanted to hang them from the nearest
lamppost. What did you mean by that remark?
Because actually, it is financial services that contribute about £72 billion in tax to our economy. And I believe passionately in UK business. And as Foreign Secretary, I might say, in answer to the gentleman's question, I spend a lot of my time actually promoting UK business, both in this country and abroad. And I will continue to do so if I'm lucky enough to succeed.
You could have said, in response to the Belgian ambassador, you could have said, well, businesses are terribly resilient. They will adapt to new circumstances.
Which is true.
But instead, you said that phrase. What did you actually mean by that?
Well, I was referring to very powerful lobby groups who wanted to have a particular type of exit from the European Union, or non-exit from the European Union, that would not actually achieve the result that we want. I really think, no, come on. I really think, you look at my record, both as mayor and indeed everything I've ever written or done, I'm the most passionately pro-business Conservative politician you could hope to meet. And I've never known one single stray, distorted remark wrenched out of context to be so widely and erroneously.
But you do have a habit of making these remarks. That's the point, isn't it? There are so many occasions over the last 15, 20 years where you have had to clarify your remarks.
I love hearing questions from you, but what about more from the audience? I mean, I think if you go through the millions of words that I have said or written in the last 30 years, of course, like with our friend at the cocktail party. I think it was my own cocktail party coming. You can find things that can be made to look as though they mean something else, or you can distort them.
Let's have another question then.
That's just a fact of life.
Janice Sylvester Hall. Where are you, Janice? Over here.
Good afternoon. So I'm Janice Sylvester Hall, and as a councillor in the district of Lichfield, I'm keen to hear your plans now for HS2.
Let me tell you that HS2, I represent Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and HS2, I'm afraid, I mean, we managed to get a tunnel out through a lot of it, but the fact is that it is going to cause a great deal of difficulties for my constituency. If I wanted to be chaired in triumph down the streets of Uxbridge, I would come out firmly against HS2. But
well, here's your opportunity.
But let me say, I'm a passionate believer in transport infrastructure in this country, and what I've decided to do is to, and I hesitate before coming in and simply scrapping a great national project. I have anxieties about the business case for HS2. I think there are questions, legitimate questions, that any incoming Prime Minister would want to satisfy himself about, or herself about, before what I think is a no-go decision in December about profiling of the spend and so on. What I will do, and I've discussed this with Andy Street and others, what I will do is I will have a review, but that will not be a review that interrupts the current timetable. I will ask Doug Oakerby, who chaired Crossrail originally and many other things, to look at that business case, to look at the profiling. And it would not, as I say, it would not interrupt the current timetable.
No, but how long would the review last?
It would obviously enable the go-no-go, the final go-no-go decision to be taken in December. And, for me, thinking about infrastructure in this country, we clearly need to do better. We clearly need to do better. And that's one of the lessons of Brexit. It's not just broadband. We should be doing incredible things with Northern Powerhouse Rail, and we should be doing wonderful things here in the West Midlands as well. So I want to have a holistic approach.
It's interesting you mentioned visionary projects. You had a visionary transport project, the Thames Estuary Airport, and I was rather disappointed to read last week that you've abandoned that, because I thought if you became Prime Minister, you might actually bring it back.
Well, all I can say is that that is not on the agenda.
Why?
Because Parliament has voted to give outline planning permission to, as everybody knows, to the third runway, and again, which is in West London. And I've long had anxieties about that project as well. What I can say there is that I will continue to be very concerned about the ability of the promoters of the third runway to meet their legal obligations in terms of noise pollution and air quality, and I will follow the current court cases with great interest.
So we can't look forward to the prospect of a Prime Minister lying down before the JCBs?
You will have to wait until the bulldozers appear.
It's a possibility. Right, Mark Malek. Where is Mark Malek? Oh, up in the cheap seats.
Hello. Given that a substantial number of the candidates in this election have admitted to either taking or attempting to take illegal drugs, do you think our current approach to drugs in this country is working?
Thanks, Mark. Look, I think that I hear lots of arguments about this. One of the encouraging things that I've seen at the moment is that actually use of drugs, of cannabis in particular, is declining. I'm not an enthusiast for people taking more drugs. Let me put it that way. I think drugs are bad, notwithstanding the solitary and inconclusive event that has been extensively documented that took place in my room in university when I was 19. I think drugs are bad. I really do. And so I hesitate before moving to some glib solution of legalization or deregulation. I listen with great care to what the police tell me nowadays, and with great respect to some of the arguments that they make. But what I think we need to do is to be very, very tough, particularly on the county lines gangs that are now bringing drugs and drug-related crime out into, including gang crime and knife crime, out into areas that have not known them before. And that is the problem, in my view. And what I would like to see, rather than simply bringing them into the free market, I would like to see a much more ruthless campaign to round up the ringleaders of these county lines operations and to put them behind
But
bars,
what can
because
be done
they're
that
doing
isn't-
terrible, terrible damage to young lives. And I may say that, middle-class drug use, I think Saj pointed this out himself, he's absolutely right. Middle-class drugs use in this country by kids is helping to encourage the dissemination of these drugs in these gangs across the country and costing the lives of so many young kids who are involved in those gangs. And that is an absolute tragedy.
But what can be done on the county lines gangs? What can be done that isn't being done now?
Well, I don't think, it doesn't seem to me that we're rolling up the networks in the way that we could. And they use this complicated jargon. They have all sorts. They disappear into the country, as they call it, and they vanish. And it doesn't seem to me that we're gripping it. And no disrespect to the police or to National Crime Agency or anybody who's involved in trying to solve this, but I don't know about colleagues, but I talk to too many people involved in mental health services, in all sorts of in social services, who really feel that the county lines drugs gangs are a massive problem, and we need to crack down on it. We need a national campaign to beat it.
Mark Eastwood is next. Mark, over there.
Good afternoon. Mark Eastwood, another proud parliamentary candidate for Dewsbury in West Yorkshire. I'd like to ask Boris, I've been selected as parliamentary candidate in a key target seat, which includes a large Asian Muslim population. What are you going to do to ensure that we attract more ethnic minorities to the Conservatives?
Well, thank you, Mark. And I think actually our party has changed out of all recognition in the last 20 years in terms of its the breadth of its representation and of its appeal. And we can be very proud of the changes that have happened, but they haven't gone far enough. And we need to do much more still to reach out to black and minority ethnic communities across this country. And well, you need to do the kinds of things that we did in London. You need to have visible promotion of people from diverse communities across the city. You need to have a program of engagement in every mosque in your neighbourhood. You need to be talking to people from those communities, and they need to feel what is true, that they have the hope of success and progress in the Conservative Party. And I was very proud actually when I was mayor of the diversity of the team that we had at the top of City Hall. And the message of Conservatives should be that anybody can make it. Anybody can make it in our society. And, you know, as I said on TV the other night, I was very proud that my Muslim great-grandfather, what am I proud of? I'm proud he was a Muslim. I'm proud he came to this country, okay. and I think he'd be amazed that I became mayor of London and all the rest of it.
What do you make of the fact that the chairman, I think is Mohammed Amin is his name, the chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, has apparently been expelled from the party in the last few days for disobliging comments he made about, it was either you or Jeremy, but I can't honestly remember which.
I'm so sorry, and I had no idea that had happened. But you know, we need to be reaching out, and I think we can be very proud of our record of success. The Tory party has changed a great deal in the last 10 years. You know, we've got Muslims at all level in the party, but not. You know, we've got representatives of every group.
In the BBC debate, you agreed with Sajid Javid that there should be an independent inquiry into Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. How serious is that problem in your view?
I think that any form of discrimination or prejudice is ugly and intolerable, and we must stamp it out.
Do you think it? Have you had personal experiences? Have you had people come to see you to say, look, this is a real issue?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And, you know, look, I mean, discrimination can affect people in all sorts of ways and in all sorts of levels. And some people can deal with it more easily than others. But when it happens, it is vicious, and we should be totally opposed to it. But yes, certainly people have come to me, and I've always tried to be sympathetic, and in every administration I've run, we've been totally generous in our approach and inclusive.
Nigel Sable. Over here.
Good afternoon. Mr. Johnson, can you cite 2 examples which will resonate with working people, where your work has had a beneficial effect on the prosperity of communities in the UK?
Yes, I can. I would single out what we did with the expansion of the London living wage, which was, I think, when I came into the mayoralty, we had about 27 companies that were paying it. After a few years, we had about 1,000 or more that were paying it. And there was a huge increase. Millions and millions of pounds went into the pockets of some of the poorest families in the city. And I was delighted that my friend George Osborne stole that policy, an act of theft I wholly condone, and made it into a national Conservative policy. And as a result, we Conservatives can be very proud of what we're doing in helping people on low incomes to take home more every week. And that's a great, great thing. And if I had what I want for our country is higher pay, not higher taxes. That should be our approach. Higher pay for the low paid, not higher taxes, and take people on low incomes out of tax. And I think the second thing that I would mention,
just before we get to the second thing, can I just on the promise that you made, I think it was in one of your columns, that you want to reduce tax for people earning between 50 and 80,000 to take them out of the top tax bracket. How does that fit with lowering taxes for the lower paid?
Because it's part of it would be part of a package where we would lift up allowances for the low paid to help relieve the burden on the low paid. And obviously continue to work on expanding the living wage. But I don't think that we Conservatives should be at all shy of discussing the way in which people on middle incomes, and I'm talking about nurses or heads of maths departments or police inspectors, who are being captured in the higher tax rates. And that seems to me to be something that we Conservatives should take an interest in. And if we can do something to reduce the burden of taxation, not just on the whole country, but on people on middle incomes, that will be a very good thing. We should not be at all shy of discussing that.
Okay, your second thing.
And the second thing, well remembered yet. The second thing I'm very proud of, that really it made a huge difference, I think, to people across our city, was well, I could mention a lot of things, but I'll mention housing. We built a huge number of homes. But I want to stress, since I know that this is a slightly neuralgic issue for good Conservatives, we built them, and we were able to build them by making use of fantastic transport infrastructure to develop brownfield sites, transport hubs, where it was possible to build good quality homes without going on to the green belt. And that makes a huge difference to the people of this city. And the people of our country.
Do you have a target per year?
Well, in 1968, I think this country produced about 470,000 homes. They were huge. And we should be at about 300,000, where, as you know, perhaps more, we're well behind those numbers. I'm not going to set a target, but we're clearly falling short at the moment. But in order to reach those numbers, we have to put in fantastic transport infrastructure. And let me give you one example of where we could do it. Crossrail 2. What is happening with this guy, Sadiq Khan? I don't want to, sound like the President of the United States, but, this is a fantastic project. If we built Crossrail 2, you would not only solve the problems of all the commuters coming in to southwest London, but you would liberate. You'd be able to build about 200,000 homes on brownfield sites in the Lower Lee Valley. Come on, we should be doing it. We should get on with it. And that is the way to do it. I don't want to set targets because, you know, you don't need them at the moment. What you need is a much more ambitious programme.
Nigel Demery.
How much longer have we got, Ian?
We've got less than 10 minutes.
All right, superb.
Good. Are you bored?
No. I just wondered.
I can liven it up if you like.
No, it's all right. No. There's some quite hostile bowling, I may say. But, you know, it's all right.
Mr. Johnson, you touched on this in your address, and the question was actually written for both contenders, so I'm sure you won't take this personally. You split the country in 2016. You split the electorate in 2017. You split Parliament and the party in 2019, and there's a danger of splitting the United Kingdom. All this happened on your watch. We've been called the nasty party again after 17 years.
No.
Please explain how you will unify all these factions. Thank you.
First of all, actually, I think that the only way to unite our party and indeed our country is to uphold the mandate of the people and get Brexit done. Because otherwise, you know, the paradox is, and I think with great respect to any other candidates, we need now somebody who wants to get it done and who believes in that particular project and who can see the opportunities that it offers our country. And that is that. And you see, what has happened over the last 3 years is that far from coming together, as we have failed to come out, far from healing the divisions, the tensions have grown and they have got worse. So now is the time. Get it done in a way that is positive and sensible, and then to get onto the real heart of your question, then show what I call the essential symmetry at the heart of our conservative beliefs. And I mean that vital symbiosis that between free market economics and fantastic public services and infrastructure. And that is a winning formula. And the broad, and believe me, the huge bulk of the British electorate and British population totally get that. Indeed, there's only a very tiny minority of people in politics who don't share those views, and they're represented by a semi-Marxist cabal that's currently piratically taken hold of the Labour Party. And our opportunity is to advance that agenda again, based, as I say, on education, infrastructure, and technology, do some fantastic things for our country in the next year or so, and believe me, that will bring our party together, and we will restore the winning position that we deserve. That's my agenda.
How do you bring together the Conservative Parliamentary Party? Now, you've got over half their votes, so that's a good start. But how can you get...
Yeah, but let's just hold that thought. That was a very good point, Ian, you just made, which a characteristically good point, if I may say so.
Well, no, let me finish the question, because I want to know how you can unite Dominic Grieve on the one side and Marc Francois on the other. Because Dominic Grieve, I don't know if you heard him on the Today programme this morning, he was essentially threatening to bring down your government before you'd literally done anything. You could be the Lady Jane Grey of British Prime Ministers if you're not careful.
But I mean, well, a couple of points in answer to that. First of all, actually, I've got people from all wings of the party supporting me, and you know, you look at who we've got. I think, you know, Bob Neal told me yesterday that he wanted to support me, who's been very much of the Dominic Grieve persuasion. I had people from Lucy Fraser to Steve Baker to
But if there
everybody can see what I'm trying to do.
If there are 15 or 20 of them, Dominic Grieve, maybe Philip Hammond, lots of others, who have threatened to vote against the Conservative government in a vote of confidence, therefore presumably they wouldn't be able to stand in a future general election. If they're willing to do that, they're hardly persuadable, are they?
Well, let's see. Because, you know what I think? I think these are sensible, sober, mature, good people. And they can see that politics has changed since March the 29th. And they can see, we can all see, on both sides of the House, we can see the reality that we face. Unless we get this thing done, unless we work together, unless we swallow our pride and our differences and come together, I think we're going to have a terminal problem in our party. And that's the incentive that I think all of us face. And I think it was Dr. Johnson who said, depend upon it, sir, nothing concentrates the mind so powerfully in a man as the knowledge that he's going to be hung in a fortnight, or something like that. And I'm misquoting it, but that is the reality. We need to do this, not just for the sake of democracy, though that is vital, but also because our great party will otherwise not be able to go on and deliver all the fantastic things that people on both sides, all sides of our parties, want to do. We need to get this thing done and move on.
What do you... What do you make of the fact that Rory Stewart said he would be quite happy to work with Nigel Farage to bring Brexit about, but wouldn't work with you?
Well, what can I say? I just referred to the answer I gave a few moments ago, which was that there is an extraordinary wealth of talent in the Conservative Party, and I'm sure that everybody will be wanting to put their shoulders to the wheel and get things done. And let's hope that goes for Rory as well.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. I'll see you later on. I'm coming to Sutton Coldfield in a minute. See you. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a quick 2-minute reset and then we will see a short video film from the Jeremy Hunt campaign.
Hi, I'm Jess, and 1 year ago I was hired as the campaign manager for Northampton North. It's been a busy year, but we're making real progress. My focus has been on growing our membership and recruiting new activists. We have a fantastic team out knocking on doors and hearing from residents all year round. Because of this, we have a team ready to win at the next election.
My name is Akram Mwanga. My role is Borough Campaign Manager for Barking and Newham. My role involves bridging the communication gap between the association officers and the volunteers, and also the voters, and also CCHQ. I'm the go-to man.
My name's Reece Fox and I'm the Borough Campaign Manager for Enfield and Haringey. When I started in Enfield and Haringey in 2017, my main aim was to build capacity. My team were going out once a week with maybe 1 or 2 people. Now, in 2019, they're going out 3 times a week with triple that figure. And that capacity building programme is really paying off.
It's been hard work, but now that the association has me as a full-time campaign manager, we can work together to get more members and more activists. And it's working. We've managed to grow our membership by more than 1/3 in just 12 months. It's partly because of the approach we take. I'm a big believer in making campaigning fun.
My priorities for the future are training and more training, getting more volunteers, and we need to get the support base for the party to carry out a massive campaign. We need to get more volunteers and capable to go onto the doorstep and engage with voters on a day-to-day basis.
It is thanks to your support that we can continue to build capacity.
Across the country, campaign managers like me are doing great work, winning elections, raising money and bringing in new members.
Labour are ready. In the last 7 months, they have recruited 102 members of staff. So with your support, we can continue to build capacity and take the fight to Labour.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to watch a video from the Jeremy Hunt campaign. Then Jeremy will address us for up to 7 minutes.
The most striking quality about Jeremy Hunt was his unwavering commitment to get results. I think perhaps part of that is to do with his background in business. No matter what the obstacles were, he was prepared to push through them. He wanted to get results.
I've seen him deliver on the things that matter most to the British people. He has credibility from all sides. I trust him on Brexit.
I've known Jeremy for 40 years, and about 25 of those years we've worked together, setting up various businesses. Those early days were absolutely about his determination and grit. He would never give up.
When I first met Jeremy, I realised he was a man who actually was committed to making a difference.
In 2008, I lost my baby son Joshua as a consequence of serious failures in his care during my campaign to kind of uncover the truth about what happened. I was struggling to be heard, and Jeremy really listened and treated me as a grieving dad rather than a troublemaker. I knew that this was somebody who was going to change things.
My mum died quite tragically in poor care in Mid-Souths. Jeremy was incredibly kind. He saw the bereaved daughter behind the campaigner, and he saw it was people that mattered.
I have known Jeremy Hunt since the early 2000s. He and his business partner started funding the education of children living with HIV in our community-based programme. Jeremy's generosity was sensed by us all.
That desire to make a difference really drives him. It's never been about him. It's always been about what he can do to help others.
The work he's done will save the lives of countless babies, and other families will not have to go through the kind of pain that we did.
People often underestimate Jeremy because he comes across as being such a polite and generous and nice person, and he is. But I remember hearing him warning the EU not to mistake British politeness for British weakness, and I thought that just about sums him up.
I was pessimistic about the London Olympics. I thought, we could mess this up. I remember talking to Jeremy in the build-up. He said, no, we're a great country. We can do this if we have the right mindset. The delivery was outstanding, but also had this element of fun. I know that Jeremy was very involved in getting that balance right.
He believes in Britain as a force for good in the world. He's shown strong values at the FCO and consistently good judgment.
Negotiating, toughing it out when things get really difficult, keeping going, having a vision. Those are the skills that we need in a Prime Minister.
He's a unifier. He's somebody who can reach out to different groups of people.
My dad always taught me that politics should be about making a difference in ordinary people's lives. And Jeremy made a huge difference to our lives. He gave us hope, and that for me is the main thing, that he gave us hope in some very, very dark days.
Colleagues, friends, we've had an exciting start to this campaign. For me, here in the West Midlands, I've been to a steel factory outside Kidderminster, a chocolate factory in Tenbury. I've had a free haircut. I made a Balti in Birmingham. And, the internet, because I'm the underdog, the internet has been kind to me for the first time in my life. And they're running a campaign to help me find the slogan that I should be putting to the country and to the membership. And we've had hashtag take a punt on Hunt, hashtag Jezzers the Bezzer, and hashtag Hunty McHuntface. Now be very, very careful how you say that one, because we're the party of family values. Friends, we are in a very serious situation. Get things wrong, and there will be no Conservative government, maybe even no Conservative party. Get things right, and we can deliver Brexit, unite the party, and send Corbyn packing. And that's our choice. But you know, in this Brexit debate, we've had a lot of discussion about how we Brexit, but not enough discussion about who. Who is the Prime Minister we trust to send to Brussels and lead us out of this crisis? And we send the wrong person. Catastrophe awaits. If you choose me, I'll be the first Prime Minister who's been an entrepreneur by background. How many people here have set up their own business? Put up your hand if you set up. That's the Conservative family. Lots and lots of hands going up. And what is it that we entrepreneurs do? We negotiate. If we send the wrong person, there's going to be no negotiation, no trust, no deal, and if Parliament stops that, maybe no Brexit. Send the right person, and there's a deal to be done. Send that right person, and we can do what we all need to do, which is to come back with something positive for our country. And that's what I want to do. And when we do that, what incredible opportunities await this fantastic country. You know, someone who set up on their own, I am champing at the bit to turn our economy into the most pro-business, pro-enterprise, fastest growing, most high-tech, greenest economy in Europe. That's what I did. I want other young people to be able to do exactly the same thing I did. And you know, we have the best universities in Europe. We've got more tech entrepreneurs, more medicines being developed. We could be the world's next Silicon Valley. And that could happen right here in the West Midlands, because you've got the 5G pilot happening in Birmingham. You've got driverless cars happening at Warwick Manufacturing Group. You've got so many gaming companies in Leamington Spa. It's been rechristened Silicon Spa, not the kind of spa that you take your wife to after you've got her nationality wrong, mind you. But there is this potential, incredible potential, and I'm going to take a giant step to making that happen by a radical cut in corporation tax to 12.5% Irish levels to turbocharge the British economy. I want to land an economic... I want to land an economic jumbo jet on Europe's doorstep so that when it comes to those trade talks, they need us every bit as much as we need them. Now, I'm also the Foreign Secretary who wants Britain to walk tall in the world. My dad was in the Navy. We followed him around from Plymouth to Portsmouth to Surrey to Scotland, which is why, by the way, I'm passionate about our union. Thanks to his generation, we won the Cold War. And you know, the risks out there are increasing, which is why I've said I will increase defence spending to beyond 2% of GDP on top of the 0.7% aid commitment. And I've said I'll do that, not just because of increasing aggression from countries like Russia, because at the point of Brexit, I want the world to know that Britain, the country, one of the very few countries that has championed democratic values and the security necessary to underpin it. I want the world to know that Britain is here, Britain's back, Britain's voice is strong in the world, and we will defend our values. Now, I'd also be the first Prime Minister who's run our NHS. And you have some fabulous hospitals here in Birmingham, UHB, Birmingham Women and Children's. But you also have mid-staffs, or had mid-staffs. And I'll never forget my first month as Health Secretary. The Department of Health advised me not to meet the mid-staffs families. I rejected that advice. And I met a lady called Julie Bailey. She lost her mum in a horrible, horrible death. She looked me in the eye. She said, Jeremy, you could change all this. And I hope I did, because by the time I finished, nearly 3 million more patients were using good or outstanding hospitals compared to the time I started. And you know, we Conservatives, we can't just have an economic mission, we must have a social mission. And I want our next social mission to be the social care system for every single older person so that they can live in dignity. And I want it to be the education system so that no one leaves education not able to read or write, not with a rigorous qualification so they can get a decently paid job. I want us to be the first government, a Conservative government that abolishes illiteracy in our society and shows the world our Conservative values. And finally, politics is about winning elections. And I'll be the first Prime Minister in half a century to have won a marginal seat. I know what it's like to knock on every door, need every single vote. I'm looking at every single vote right now. I love you all. And there are some very, very important marginal seats in the West Midlands: Stoke North, Hailsham, Stourbridge, Walsall North, brilliant MPs. And we've got to be there for them. But I promise you 2 things as a campaigner. Firstly, when we go back to the British people, we will get more young people voting Conservative, because we can't be the party of aspiration if the most aspirational people in the country aren't supporting us, and we're going to get them back. And the second thing I promise you is I will never provoke a general election before we've left the European Union. I won't do it. The lesson of Peterborough is that that would kill us. Ignore that, and we ignore the crocodile lurking under the surface of British politics. A Labour Party led by the most ruthless, dangerous, anti-Western, anti-British, hard-left cabal there's ever been under Jeremy Corbyn. Now, faced with a hard-left populist, we could choose our own populist. Or we could do better. We could choose our own Jeremy. A Jeremy who is going to deliver Brexit, unleash the potential of our extraordinary country, deliver true social justice. Not so much for those of us in this hall. Most of us have done okay. But for people watching at home, young people desperate to get a decently paid job, families struggling to afford a home, older people who just want to live out their days with dignity and respect. We have to be there for them. That is our Conservative Party. Let me show you how. Thank you.
Hello. Let me ask you one or two of the same questions I asked Boris Johnson, possibly not from the first few minutes, but you become Prime Minister, you go to see the Queen, you do your where there is discord, maybe bring harmony moment on the steps of Downing Street, you walk through that door. What's the first thing that you turn your attention to? What has been the one issue that's driven you that you really want to get solved?
Well, the first issue that we have to do for this country before we do anything else is to solve the Brexit crisis. And it's very important as Prime Minister that you only make promises, whether before you become Prime Minister or when you've become Prime Minister, that you're actually going to keep. And one of the reasons that we failed to get a deal that could get through the House of Commons is because the EU stopped believing that the British government could deliver the British Parliament. So let me answer that question. The first thing I would do would be to put together a Brexit negotiating team that would include, for example, the DUP,
the ERG, the Brexit purists in our party, Scots Tories, Welsh Tories, One Nation Tories, a team of people so that the EU knew that whatever we were proposing, we could deliver through Parliament. Basic first rule of negotiation.
But there's something that doesn't add up there, isn't there? Because if you only include Conservatives in your negotiating team...
DUP.
Well,
DUP.
okay, and the DUP.
Well, that
but
gives
if
us a majority.
if you're not including other parties, how can you be sure it'll get through? Because as we all know, there are plenty of Conservatives who will be determined not to support anything that you negotiate.
Well, that's not my reading of the Conservative Party. I think that there are plenty of Conservatives who would consider bringing down the government if they thought we were deliberately going for a no-deal Brexit. But they want to deliver on the democratic outcome of the referendum, which is an absolute democratic necessity for our country right now. We need to recreate that Conservative DUP family that can get us a majority in the House of Commons. That is the only way. We've tried it with Labour, it didn't work. We've got to do it this way.
But even with the DUP, and depending on how this by-election goes in Brecon, you could be down to a majority of just 2 or 3. Even with them, you can't be sure that you can get it through the Commons. Surely you need to reach out, which is what some people wanted to do back in 2016, reach out to the other parties, bring them involved then, but Theresa May refused to do that.
Well, I don't think that's the right strategy. I don't think it would work. I think Labour has only one objective, which is to provoke a general election and put Corbyn in Downing Street. And by the way, if Corbyn gets into Downing Street, there will never be Brexit. That man will never be allowed by his party to deliver Brexit. And that is why it is so important that we hold together as a Conservative DUP family and get on and deliver Brexit.
Second on that, because of course, before he became leader of the Labour Party, he had a Eurosceptic voting record as good as John Redwood's. You didn't.
Well, let's look at his record since he's been leader of the Labour Party. At every stage, when he's had choices that could deliver Brexit, he has chosen the opposite. At every stage when I could deliver Brexit, I have voted for Brexit. That's the difference between the two of us.
Isn't part of your problem, though, that of your 6 public backers, of your public backers in Parliament, only 6 voted to leave? Now, you've got Liam Fox and Penny Mordaunt on board, so Brexiteers can be reassured by that. But all of the other public supporters voted Remain. You voted Remain yourself in June 2016, but you have flip-flopped on this subject, haven't you?
I have not. I think it's a matter of public record that I voted and campaigned to remain in the European Union. But like millions of Remainers, I want to get on and deliver Brexit. I think we can make a huge success of it. I think the economy has performed far, far better post the votes than people were predicting. And we can make this work terrifically well. But if we carry on 3 years after that referendum and labelling people as Remainer, Remainer, Brexiteer, Remainer, Brexiteer, we're not going to unite our party. And we're not going to get this vote through the House of Commons. We've got to come together and deliver Brexit.
But there will be plenty of people in this audience who voted Leave. Why should they support someone who didn't vote Leave and just doesn't feel it in your gut the same way that they do?
Oh, yes, I do. Look at my record. Look at my record since that referendum. I have been very clear on every occasion that we needed to fight hard to get the best possible deal from the European Union, and I have voted for Brexit. Like my Remainer colleagues, I say Remainer, we're not Remainers. We're Democrats who want to deliver Brexit. That's what we are. And I have to say that this language is so destructive because we're going to need a coalition inside the Conservative Party. Everyone from Dominic Grieve and Ken Clarke to Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker. We're going to need every single one of those Conservative friends and colleagues to vote with us to get out of the European Union if we're going to deliver on that democratic result. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to have a Prime Minister who binds everyone together so that we can do our historic mission.
But just after the referendum, you wrote an article for The Telegraph where you said the UK should negotiate a Norway Plus option with Brussels, which would see full access to the single market with what you called a sensible compromise on free movement. Look, so are you open to free movement?
No, I wrote that 1 week, I think less than 7 days after the referendum result. So I think, you know, people were still absorbing the result. But since what I actually said in that article was that we needed democratic endorsement of the shape of Brexit we have. And we've had that. We had a general election in which more than 80% of the country voted for parties that wanted to leave the single market and indeed at that stage leave the customs union, because that was Labour's policy at that stage. So we know what the country wants. We need to get on and deliver it, and we need a Prime Minister who has a plan that can actually bring the party together, negotiate a better deal with the European Union, get it through Parliament, get out and make a success of our country.
This is where I don't understand, because you've only got till the 31st of October. Boris Johnson has committed that we will be out on the 31st of October, come what may. You haven't done that. But how do you negotiate when the whole of the European Commission is away for the whole of August? You don't have a new commission sworn in until the 1st of November. You've got the European Summit on the 17th of October. You've got a 6-week window there. And then, even if you do come to some sort of deal, you've got to then get it through Parliament. And we know that the European Commission has said they are not going to open the withdrawal agreement.
A wise Prime Minister makes choices on the basis of the options that are actually available in front of them at the time. Now, we don't know what the situation will be on the 31st of October, but if there is no prospect of a better deal, if the European Union have been as inflexible as you say, and if no deal is on the table, then I will leave without a deal, because we must keep our promise to the British people. But I would do so with a heavy heart because of the risks to businesses up and down the country and the risks to the Union. But if we have to in the end, I would do that. But the reason that I haven't made the pledge that Boris has made is because I think it's very important that Prime Ministers keep their word. It is entirely possible that Parliament will rule out no deal between now and October the 31st, or indeed, as you were just talking about to Boris, that members of our own party say I was having a sneaky listen from behind the wings, but members of our own party have said they might vote against the government in that situation. Now, if that happened and Parliament blocks no deal, and remember they did this in March, the only way to overcome that would be to have a general election and change Parliament. And that would be a profound mistake, because it would let Corbyn right in. There'd be no Brexit at all. So we must only promise what we can deliver. I want to get out as soon as possible, and I believe that I have the negotiating skills to give us a better chance of getting a deal that can actually get through Parliament.
So if we did leave with no deal, which you admit is a possibility, what will you do to plan for it? Because you're in the Cabinet, as I understand it, no deal preparations have effectively been wound down over the last few months, when in most people's opinion they should have been wound up.
Well, they are in a better state than they were 6 months ago, and I think a lot of work has actually been done. But I think the one thing that I would do that is different to the approach that's been taken by Theresa May and Philip Hammond, I mentioned in my speech that I want to turbocharge our economy by cutting corporation tax to Irish levels, 12.5%, one of the very lowest in the world. That would also be the very best insulation against no deal, because it would turbocharge our businesses, it would give them more cash flow to deal with, and I think we should get on and do these things right away and show the world that post-Brexit, whatever our Brexit deal, this is going to be the most pro-business, pro-enterprise, pro-growth economy in the world.
But when you say that and you go and have meetings with Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, they'll say, see, we told you so. You just want a Singapore-style economy off the coast of Europe. You're not going to want to have the kind of tough regulations that we have. That's what they accused us of right from the beginning.
Well, if you're talking about Singaporean commitment to infrastructure, and fibre to the home and the airports they have, all those kinds of things. If you're talking about Singaporean entrepreneurialism and dynamism, yes, please. But if you're talking about the social model, I was the guy who ran the NHS or was responsible for the NHS for nearly 6 years. That is part of the social contract in this country, and that's not going to change.
Well, we'll come on to the NHS in just a moment. Will you declare a climate emergency?
Well, these labels, frankly, aren't the most important thing. I think there is an emergency in the sense that if we don't take action now, by the time we get to 2050, it's going to be too late. But what people who care about the climate want to see is action. And what we can be proud of as a Conservative government is that We have gone further and faster than any other major economy. We've seen I think since 1990, we've seen our GDP go up by 70% and our emissions go down by 40%. It's a pretty extraordinary record. But that's not the question. It's not whether we've done something, it's whether we've done enough. And the answer, truthfully, is that we haven't done enough. We've lost, nearly half the world's coral. If temperatures go up by another half a degree, we'll lose 80%. If they go up by another degree, we'll lose all the coral in the world. Now, that is just one example of the kind of phenomenon that we're facing. But when I talk to my young kids, I want them to see the Great Barrier Reef one day. I want them to see the wonders of nature, and I want them to be safe in the knowledge that this generation did what it took to make sure that we were responsible custodians.
When you have Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom, who are both considered to the right of you, when they both say that they would do that, is that not something that you ought to think about? That would demonstrate a commitment to tackling the issue. Would you have a completely separate department for climate change issues, for example?
Well, I think, gestures are very important. Let me tell you what I've done as Foreign Secretary. I've campaigned for the UK to host the next big climate change conference. It's called COP26. It'll be the end of next year.
More emissions by flying into London in their private jets.
Yes, that's certainly true. But as a result of the Paris climate change deal 5 years ago, there has been a very big reduction in emissions and an increase in people's commitments. So I've been championing the UK holding that. We had a big breakthrough last week when Italy, which is one of our competitors, agreed to come in behind us and support a UK presidency. So I think there's something that all government departments can do, and I'm doing my bit.
When you were Culture Secretary back at the beginning of the coalition government, you were responsible for this decision to put the free TV licences for the over 75s onto the BBC. What's your view about what should be done now? Because there's been a lot of anger throughout the country about what the BBC have done, but you effectively made it their decision.
Well, I gave the BBC a licence fee settlement. By the way, that was a deal that I negotiated in less than 24 hours, that BBC licence fee settlement, and I'm not promising to do that with Brexit. I think it may take a little bit longer than that. And I gave them enough money in that settlement to fund free TV licences for the over 75s. In subsequent settlements, they've decided that they don't have enough money to do that. And my concern about that is that we promised in our manifesto to protect pensioner benefits. And if over 75s lose that benefit, they would feel that's a breach of our commitments. So I'd honour that commitment.
But why should the BBC be responsible for welfare policy?
Well, the BBC signed up to that deal, and that was a deal with government. But I think what we have to do is be honest and truthful about our manifesto commitments.
Now, you've spoken quite often in the leadership campaign so far about your time as Health Secretary. But the truth is that you alienated the vast majority of NHS staff during that time. You were on my programme doing a phone-in the other day, and you will remember Naomi the nurse, who is a Conservative, but said she could never vote for you to be Prime Minister. And there are a lot of other people in the NHS that feel like that. What do you say to them?
Well, as Prime Minister, you have to take very difficult decisions. And as Health Secretary, you have to take life and death decisions. And you saw in that video just now some of the patients who suffered terribly. The NHS, I'm so proud of it. It does a fantastic job, and doctors and nurses do an amazing job. They really do. But sometimes we get it wrong. And in order to put things right, I had to fight some very tough battles. And I hope people can see from that I'm a kind of Prime Minister who isn't going to make my biggest priority to court popularity. I'm going to do the right thing. And I do believe the NHS got safer on my watch. And I'm very proud of the changes that were made.
Are you at all uncomfortable about using some of those people in your campaign video?
Well, those people did an absolutely remarkable thing. They lost mothers, children, sisters, brothers because of terrible things that went wrong in our health service. Now, what most people do when they have a terrible bereavement like that is they want to draw a line under it, close the chapter, move on with the rest of their lives. But they decided that they were going to relive those terrible tragedies, that terrible sadness, every single day because they wanted the NHS to improve. They're campaigners, and for me, they were also kindred spirits because they stood beside me in some of those very difficult battles. And, you know, we've got a long way to go in the NHS, but I look at some of the changes happening. I look at the changes happening at the old Mid-Staffs Hospital, now County Hospital. I look at great hospitals like UHB in the middle of Birmingham. I look at the transformation of, actually the one I'm most proud of is the transformation at Morecambe Bay, which is where James Titcombe lost his son. They had terrible problems in their maternity unit. They've now got one of the safest maternity units in the north, and I'm proud of that. And that's what those people are talking about in the video. They're proud of the changes that have been made.
Now, without mentioning the time you got the nationality of your wife wrong,
I think you've mentioned that, actually. I sort of alluded to it as well.
What's the biggest personal crisis you faced, and what lessons did you learn from it?
Probably for me, it was going through the Leveson inquiry in 2012. I had a 2-year-old child and a child that was just 3 months old. And I had the world's press camped outside my front door in Pimlico. I was being accused of something I hadn't done. I had helicopters pursuing me when I went from one part of London to another. And I found my inner steel when that happened. And I really learned to fight for what I believe. And I think that formed me. They say that if it doesn't break you, it makes you. And that's what happened to me.
Because you nearly lost your job then, didn't you?
I nearly lost my job. But, you know, do you know what I thought when that was going on? I thought, you know, thank God I didn't do this bloody thing I'm being accused of, because how miserable would I be right now if I had actually done it? And I hadn't, and I fought to clear my name, and I did.
If you're wondering why I keep tapping at my phone, it's not so I can see what Twitter's saying about this event. It's because I've got a stopwatch on it, and so I try to keep the time fair. Now, let's go to questions. If we could have the lights up, please. Heather Singleton. Where's Heather?
Good afternoon and welcome to Birmingham.
Where's Heather?
This question was for both of you. Are you looking to achieve a hard or soft Brexit? How will you get a rejected no deal through Parliament? How would you achieve a soft Brexit if the EU say a change in PM won't lead to any reopening of negotiations? Why would they listen to you?
Heather, can you just put your hand up? Because I can't.
She's up there.
Just there you are, Heather. Hello. Hi. Well, look, I am aiming heart and soul to get a deal, because you know, yesterday I was at an amazing company that manufactures steel wheels for off-road vehicles, and they've got about half the European market sewn up. Their margins, it employs about 350 people just outside Kidderminster. Their margins about 4%. A 10% tariff on their products would wipe them out. So there would be an economic impact of no deal. If that was the only way to deliver Brexit, then I'm afraid we have to do that, because that's what people have voted for, and we are a democracy first and foremost. But I would be aiming for a deal, and I believe I'm the candidate that's most likely to get a deal. If Parliament blocked a no-deal Brexit, I don't support that. I'm someone, as a negotiator, a business person, I always want to be able to walk away from a deal. I want no deal to be left on the table. But I hope Parliament would see that I'm a Prime Minister sincerely committed to getting a deal, and therefore they would understand if I came back and said that hasn't been possible. How would I persuade the Europeans to change their mind? It's going to be tough, and I'm not going to sit here as someone who wants to be Prime Minister and say this is going to be easy. But talking to European leaders, I haven't met a single one who doesn't want to find a way through this. And they say, you know, if you come back with different ideas, a different approach, and you can demonstrate that it can get through Parliament, then they'll listen. And I think they would listen to a new British Prime Minister, and I think if we get this right, we can get the deal we need.
Why would they listen to you rather than Boris Johnson?
Well, I think it's for members of the Conservative Party to make that judgment, not for me.
No, but I think you... You clearly think that you're a better place to do that. I think we'd all like to know why.
Well, I've spent a long time, talking about my background, both inside government and outside government, and I think I've demonstrated that when it comes to negotiations, I can do difficult ones. I don't blink. I'm prepared to walk away. But to answer the question, for businesses in the West Midlands, it would be patently 1,000 times better to get a deal. And that's why I think a responsible Prime Minister should aim for that.
You see, some Brexiteers will say, well, it's okay, I hear what Jeremy Hunt says about, well, I would leave with no deal if it becomes patently clear that a deal is impossible to achieve. But they probably think at the last minute, given what you said about the dangers of a no deal on the economy, and you quoted, I think, in the BBC debate, an example of a farmer that you've met that would be affected. Could you, as a responsible Prime Minister, on the 31st of October, really say to the British people, yeah, I am going to take you out with no deal, and believe me, it's going to be an absolute disaster for you all. That's not what a responsible Prime Minister does, is it?
Look, if we got to the 31st of October, and the EU have not shown any willingness to negotiate a better deal that can get through the House of Commons, that's not going to trap us in the customs union, then my judgment is that weighing those difficult options up, the political risk of no Brexit is far worse than the economic risk of no deal. And I would take us out of the European Union in that situation. But it wouldn't be
guaranteed.
100%, but it would not be my choice. If we can avoid it, if we can get a deal, that is something that a responsible Prime Minister should aim for.
Okay. A slightly allied question to this, Tom Huxley.
Hi, what changes would you seek to the withdrawal agreement?
Thank you, Tom. I think the main question, the main thing that stopped the House of Commons blocking the deal that we have at the moment is the backstop. And it's not the principle that we should have a soft border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. I think there's a very strong consensus in the House of Commons that it needs to remain a soft border with no border infrastructure. It is the fact that the agreement that we have at the moment commits us to remaining in the customs union effectively until the EU give us permission to leave. And that is not acceptable for Parliament. I don't think it's acceptable for the 52% who voted to leave the European Union. And that is the main thing that needs to change. I believe if you did that, we would be able to get a deal through the House of Commons. So that's what I focus on.
But how willing are they going to be to reopen the withdrawal agreement? Because they have made it abundantly clear, all of them. I mean, this is one thing I thought they would split at some point, but they haven't. They've remained united. And who is there to negotiate with now? Barnier's team has been disbanded. How could you possibly get them to reopen the withdrawal agreement?
Well, I'm sitting here saying this is not going to be easy, but it's not impossible either. And the reason I think there's a deal to be done is because it's in their interests as well as ours that we have an orderly Brexit. The damage, I mean, I've been to a flour processing plant in Holland.
You get around.
I get around. I've been to quite a few places as Foreign Secretary, but, there they bundle up flowers and then they ship them to Tesco and Waitrose and petrol stations up and down the country. Every single day, these flowers come in from all over the world, and their business would be absolutely decimated by tariffs. So there is a strong European interest to resolve this. If we go about it in a mature and sensible way, we have to come up with alternatives that demonstrate that we're not going to end up with border infrastructure on the island of Ireland. I believe we can do that. I think the answer will be to do with technology. And if we approach this the right way, as I say, I believe there is a deal to be done. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think there's a deal.
Have you got the details of this in a document that on day one you can go to Brussels, well, maybe not on day one, but day two, go to Brussels and say, right, these are our ideas? Or are you going to be so busy doing all of this over the next 4 weeks that it's only really once you become Prime Minister that you can really set your head to it?
Well, I have not been directly responsible for the Brexit negotiations in the last year, but I've been a member of the Cabinet and I've been observing them, and I had a lot of time to think about what I think the right solutions are. So I have a clear idea of what the solution is. I don't think it's a particularly different solution to the solution that Boris is suggesting in terms of using technology. It's just, the question is how we get there, and who is the Prime Minister we trust to go to the European Union to persuade them that we need to find a different way to have an orderly Brexit.
So your basic pitch here is that, yes, I've got that plan, but also they're more likely to deal with me because they find me easier to deal with than maybe my opponent.
Well, my pitch is that I am a negotiator, a business person. I do think that they would engage with me, but I'm also someone who has a bottom line, knows not to blink, and knows, and this is the crucial thing in any negotiation, exactly what it is we need. What we need is something that allows us to leave the European Union but does not trap us in the customs union or the single market indefinitely, so we can only leave them at the whim of the EU.
You say you know not to blink, but some people would say he's too nice. He's not going to be good in these negotiations because he will blink. How can you convince us that you wouldn't?
I think it's possible to be very polite and very tough. And I think my track record shows, some very difficult industrial disputes that I had at the Department of Health, some very complex, the negotiations I had with the Treasury to get an extra £20 billion a year for the NHS. That was a big, big negotiation. And, I had a bottom line. I would have left the government if I hadn't been able to secure what I knew the NHS and NHS staff needed, given the pressures of an ageing population. So I think the advantage of the politeness is that people will talk to you, but by golly, I hope they don't underestimate you, because I'm going to get that deal.
I guarantee this next question will be the most popular with the audience. Nicholas Binney.
Nick Binney, Lichfield District Council.
Where are you? Oh, up there.
Following the latest evidence this week of left-wing bias by the BBC, what action will you take as Prime Minister to reform this public-funded organisation?
Well, I started at a disadvantage because I gave the BBC a licence fee settlement that did not slash their budgets and do all sorts of things that some people would have liked. Let me tell you what I won't do and what I will do. What I won't do is interfere with the BBC's editorial independence, because when I go around the world, people say that the most impressive thing about this country is that we are one of the most robust democracies on the planet, and they see that a state-funded broadcaster is holding politicians, whether government or opposition, to account. But what I will do is I will say to the BBC two things. I'll say to them, first of all, I expect you to cover how tough it is to set up a business just as much as how tough it is to live on benefits. Because if we're going to have a prosperous, successful society, you need to understand the wealth creation that is the fundamental underpinning of all the social missions that we all believe in. And the second thing I'll say to the BBC is post-Brexit, I want you to have a role too. The BBC is a very trusted brand internationally. They could be a news broadcaster all over the world. They could be giving information to people who don't live in democracies about what's really happening. They could be the English language broadcaster of choice. I don't think we're anything like fulfilling that potential, and I would like them to reach for the stars and say, how could they be the world's news broadcaster? Because I think it'd be great for them, but great for Britain.
Do you think they are biased to the left?
I've experienced bias at times, and I've experienced other times when they're fair, but I think that they are themselves honest. Even people like Andrew Marr are honest. That I think the phrase he used is that there's an innate, on that occasion, there's an innate liberal bias, and that's why I think they need to redouble their efforts to understand how tough it is for people trying to get businesses off the ground, trying to create the wealth that pays for our public services.
Okay. Charlie Graver. Where's Charlie there?
As an 18-year-old looking to get a job in the next few years after university, how is your plan for Brexit and the economy going to ensure a strong graduate jobs market for young people?
Well, Charlie, thank you for asking that question. Let me say that my number one political priority is to get more people Charlie's age to support us, the Conservative Party, because we, as the party of aspiration, we've created 1,000 jobs every single day since we've been in office in 2010. It's an extraordinary achievement. We don't get the credit for it, and too many of Charlie's friends don't understand that it's the Conservatives that create those opportunities for young people. It's Labour that destroys those opportunities. So how do we win over more young people? Well, yes, we've got the argument about aspiration, and another argument, by the way, is we need to make it much easier for people to buy a house. But people need to know that we're on their side when it comes to values. They need to know that we're going to do the right thing on climate change. But we also need to recognise that young people as a group have become politicised by Brexit. We used to say, well, young people may not vote Conservative, but they don't tend to vote. That has changed, and we need to look at their very specific concerns. And if you ask me one thing, when I'm on a doorstep in my constituency that I cannot justify, it's why the interest rate on student loans is 6%. That's not fair.
So what will you do about it?
Well, we've got to cut that interest rate. I think it should be cut either to inflation or to base rate. Let me say this, and this is a message that some people listening from home won't agree with. I think our tuition fee reforms were the right thing. They have made our universities some of the best funded universities in the world. But the fact is that nearly half of student debt is not paid back. And that says to me that there's something wrong in this system. And if you have these very, very high interest rates, which are essentially to subsidise the half of the debt that isn't paid back, then what happens is people's debt ratchets up. It even ratchets up when they're at university, when they can't do anything about it because they can't work or pay it back at that stage. And that risks discrediting a very good system. That's why I think it's a wrong we need to put right.
Charlie was talking about the graduate jobs market, but of course not everyone goes to university. Do you think a lot of youngsters have been let down over the last 10 or 15 years by them being encouraged to go to university when actually they would have been better off doing an apprenticeship or something else?
We can be incredibly proud of Michael Gove's education reforms, which I think have transformed state education. They made some of our state schools as good as the best private schools. Absolutely remarkable. But if we have a blind spot, it's not the 50% of school leavers who go to university, many of whom get, I think, one of the best educations in the world. It's the 50% who don't go to university. Nearly a quarter of primary school leavers don't reach the required standard for reading and writing. And that often doesn't get corrected at secondary school. They then end up without a rigorous qualification. If they get thrown out of their job because of driverless cars in 10 years' time, they won't be able to retrain if they can't read. Now, as Conservatives, we believe in opportunity for everyone. And that's why I said I want us to be the Conservative government that abolishes illiteracy and promises that every single young person will leave education with a rigorous qualification that means they can get a decently paid job.
Nobody's going to disagree with any of that, but it is a bit motherhood and apple pie, isn't it? Because you can say, well, we have this aspiration, but how are you actually going to get there?
Okay, well, we can talk policy. I won't give you a very long list, but one thing I would do is I would say that schools can't be good or outstanding in their Ofsted rating if they're not teaching all their children to read to the required level. I think it needs to be an absolute flaw when you have your inspection that you are doing what it takes to make sure people can read properly. Secondly, I would like to make sure we have the same rigour in the FE sector that we have in the schools sector. And I would say to the further education sector, there is more money on the table, but it's got to be a deal. We've got to know that what you're teaching people is so rigorous, so solid, that when people leave, they're going to be able to get a decently paid job. And what's a decently paid job? Well, for me, the average wage in this country is 27 grand. And I think everyone leaving our education system should have a qualification that means they can at least aspire to that.
Right, next question. Brian Tustain. Over there.
Brian Tustain, Warwickshire and Worcestershire area. Mr. Hunt, violent knife and gun crimes are simply epidemic on the streets of Birmingham and towns across the West Midlands and indeed the country. What actions would you take as Prime Minister to eliminate this issue?
Well, I think Sajid Javid has made some very important proposals in this area. I think there's two things you have to do. First of all, you have to make sure, Brian, that we've got the right police numbers. And we had that period of austerity when we had that recession that was made so much worse by Labour. We had to make big cuts across the public services. And I think we probably brought down police numbers too much. And I think there was a delayed impact, and I think we're now feeling it. And the biggest way you stop knife crime is to make sure that the perpetrators know they're going to get caught. So that's the first thing.
So just to be specific on that, though, Sajid Javid said he would commit to 20,000 extra police officers to bring us back to where we were in 2010. Boris Johnson just now said something a little similar. Would you make a commitment on that?
I will make a commitment to extra police officers. I'm not going to make a commitment on the spot to an exact number, but I do think that there was a delayed impact. But I think there's something else, and it actually relates to the question that we talked about earlier, the causes of that knife crime. If those people left our education system with a decent qualification, as we've just been talking about, with hope that they can get on a ladder, they can get a decently paid job, then maybe they would choose a life different to the life of gangs on the street. So I think we need to tackle those causes as well.
Mitchell Burns-Jackson. Up the top there.
Due to the sharp rise in LGBT+ related hate crimes in the UK, how will you, as Prime Minister, not only protect members of the LGBT community, but also ensure that schools are not held to ransom over the teachings of same-sex relationships?
Where's up there? Mitchell, there you are. Well, thank you for asking that question. And we, I think, have shown the country that we are not the Conservative Party they like to think we are, by the way we've championed LGBT+ rights, and by the way that David Cameron brought in gay marriage. And I'm proud that we've done that as a party, and I think that shows our modern, compassionate, Conservative approach. But we're not there yet. You're absolutely right. One of the tensions that we have to deal with is that in some schools, parents are reluctant for children to be taught about people's basic rights. And for me, my reason for my views on this was that when I was at school, on my very last day, one of my very best friends told me that he was gay. And he had kept it secret for the whole time that we'd been friends together. It was like he was burying a guilty secret. And he only felt he could tell me on the day that we were leaving that school and we may never see each other again. And that really made me think. And for me, being gay is it's like being left-handed. It's something that you're born with. It's not something you choose. It's not something you can change. And that's why we have to recognise every child. Every child needs to understand that. And this is one of the great pieces of progress that we've made. And so we have to leave no stone unturned in making sure that every school, including faith schools, is making sure that we get the right messages across to our children.
And what about the issue that we all know about in Birmingham at the moment, where parents in a particular school, but this is not just only in Birmingham, object to their primary school-age children being taught about the fact that not everyone has a mother and a father? What do you do as a government about that?
Well, I'm afraid you just have to insist that the schools will teach what is right. And this is a country where we do not accept prejudice against people who are gay, and I'm afraid they have to understand that.
But the problem is that traditionally, Conservatives have always believed that parents know best how their children should be educated. And if the parents object to that, should they not have the right to say that their children shouldn't be taught those things?
Well, of course, as Conservatives, we always trust parents, and there's a tension here. But we also have to think about the rights of the children in those schools, including some children who themselves may be gay, and their need to understand that this is a society that is going to be completely colourblind. It's going to be completely blind to people's sexuality, and that is a great social advance that we've made, and we must defend it.
So, you have young children. Presumably, therefore, you're happy for them to be taught about same-sex relationships in primary school?
Absolutely. And I remember taking going to pick up my son from a birthday party, and I said, just take me to the mummy and the daddy so I can thank them for the party. And he said, oh no, she hasn't got a mummy and a daddy, she's got two mummies. And he was completely relaxed about it, didn't think it was remotely surprising or unusual, and that is a happy family. And we as Conservatives are the party of the family, and I'm just so proud that we've become a party that understands that families can be different, they can have different shapes and sizes, they can still be happy, solid, strong families.
I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. Michael Series? Over that.
Good afternoon, Jeremy, and well pronounced, Ian. Thank you. We're in Birmingham this afternoon, and we've got the HS2 station probably just over a mile down the road. If you're the next leader of this party, and of course the next Prime Minister, will you continue with HS2? If you will, why will you continue with this? And if not, what would you prioritise instead of HS2?
Michael, I'm going to answer that question very directly, and I know there'll be some people in this room who won't agree with what I'm going to say, and there'll be some people at home, Conservative Party members, who won't agree with it either. But I will proceed with HS2. It is absolutely vital for our country. And there are two reasons why. First of all, at the point of Brexit, the world is looking at us. They're saying, what sort of economy are you going to be? Are you going to be an economy that still can't do big infrastructure projects, even though in Japan they had their first high-speed rail in 1964, 2 years before I was born. We need proper transport infrastructure in this country if we're going to be the most high-tech, modern, fastest-growing economy in Europe. And the second reason is, as Conservatives, we can't just be the party of prosperity in London and the South East. We have to be the party that spreads prosperity. to the whole country. And that's why it's not just HS2 for me, it's the third runway, it's Northern Powerhouse Rail, it's fibre to the home across the whole country. All these things that will spread that prosperity to every corner of our great country.
Would you like to speed up the development of the second and third stages of HS2?
Well, you've squeezed a few spending commitments out of me this afternoon, Ian, so I think I'll leave it at that for now. But let's deliver HS2. I mean, this is a huge project, and then when we've delivered that, we can look at what next.
Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Is that it now? Are you saying any more, or are we done? I think we're done. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your close attention over the last couple of hours. I hope you've learned something from this afternoon. If you want to watch it all again, I'm sure the Conservatives will have it on their website within the hour. Thank you very much.